Transplanting Tomatoes Part 1. So, when you plant tomatoes, first of all, tomatoes love to be transplanted. They grow better, they get stronger roots the more they're ripped out of the ground and put in new ground. So, the best way is to plant a whole bunch of seeds in one pot. I only have 2 here for demonstration. And when they get about this big where they have their first true leaves, you can see, except the camera won't focus, you can see that they have the initial seed leaves, but then they also have this next set of leaves coming. Their second set of leaves, those are the first true leaves. You can actually just pry those out, just kind of loosen the dirt that they're in. Never touch the stem. The stems bruise very easily, and you can just pull those out of the ground. Once you've done that, you can go to a tray, like a seed tray, and we use popsicle sticks because they're easy to label. You can just make a hole in there, set your plant there. Again, try not to touch the stem more than you can. Stems bruise easily. If leaves rip off, they'll be fine. You can set that in there, make sure it's in there nice and firm. Put it down as deep as you want, as long as those leaves are above the ground, because that'll just help it grow stronger roots. And don't be afraid. Little seedlings are real tough. They're tough. If the seed breaks off the first time, just loosen the ground a little bit more. Try again. Again, tomatoes love to be transplanted. So if you just plant seeds in one of these little 6-packs, you're going to end up with really tall, skinny plants that won't be nearly as productive or healthy. So again, just drop it in there, tighten up the soil, and you'll be on your way. 2 of tomato transplanting. Now we see we have all these healthy transplants. They all look green. They all look nice. No browning or disease. So, to start, we're going to do pretty much the same as with the seedlings, except first we'll need to put a hole. This is a high-tech tool called a dibbler. If you look close, you can see it's a broken hammer handle. High-tech tool called a dibbler. And you take those and you just put holes in them about the same size as the plug. These are the plugs. This is a mortgage lifter tomato. So, again, same thing. You just kind of pry up, loosen that plug so we don't have to rip too much of the plant. We can just pick that up. You see those roots in there? It's time for them to move. You just push that guy in there, tighten the soil around it, and we have our transplanted tomato plant. Again, tomatoes love to be transplanted. Here we go, another mortgage lifter. Supposedly called that because the guy who bred them paid off his mortgage. He was going to be foreclosed and paid off his mortgage with the tomato. That one didn't come up with the whole block. Using 2 hands is a little easier, but it's hard to hold a camera with your teeth. Again, just tighten that around there. Make sure it's in good and tight so you can put it down low. That's just fine. It won't hurt it at all. It'll just help the roots to be bigger and stronger. You see some of these actually already have blossoms. I don't really want them to have blossoms yet. Try not to touch that stem. Stems still bruise easily even when they're this big. I don't really want them to have blossoms, so you want to clean your hands and then pick those blossoms off. You really want to get as little dirt on the leaves as possible because that can spread fungal diseases. Alright, transplanting tomatoes. Once they're in this size pot, they'll be ready to go in the ground. This is about a 4-inch pot. If you want to keep them more than a couple weeks, more than a month in this size pot, you'll have to get a bigger pot, and then you'll take up all your room inside the house with tomato plants. This is a video that I put together 4 or 5 years ago when we were living in Tennessee, so I mentioned dates a couple times there. They're different than we would use here in Texas. Hopefully this is a help to you. Okay, it is March 2nd, and I have planted some tomatoes. I'm going to show you how I do it here. I have a little bitty guy here and a slightly larger guy here. I'll show you the little guy first because you can see when I plant them, I break off all but the top 2 leaves. I know often people will say to plant them deeply and all that, but I want just the top 2 leaves. Everything else needs to be off the ground. If you plant them deeply, often you end up getting leaves touching the ground, which leads to disease. So that's the first thing. I break off all but the top 3 leaves, 2 to 3 leaves. I did that on this one. I actually planted this one last week. I like to plant a few out early to see, and you can see it's already, I've broken off these bottom leaves, but it's already growing a second vine. It's growing off of a sucker. So the process has already started. When you break off those leaves, what it does is it leads to larger or longer leaves on the plant as it gets older, and that is what we want to get all the sunlight. Okay, to kind of show you the structure of the tomato plant, if you're not real familiar with them, this is from last year. This is a stalk that got saved. So you can see the tomato plant grows up here, and this would be a sucker. A sucker will go out above every leaf. So here is a sucker that was coming out. Here's another sucker coming out. You can see the main stem comes up this way. Then at some point the main stem splits. That's where this kind of looks like a split. And then suckers continue to come out. So you can see I left, some of these broke off because it is pretty brittle because it's last year's. But you can see I left these on, and these are what would be tied to the stakes. So this would be in the ground, and each one of these main stems, each one of these suckers would be going to the uprights on the cage. Okay, for the structure of the tomato plant, once we have it planted and have the lower leaves taken off, we're going to support this plant so that the main stem stays in the middle down here, so it doesn't flop and grow across the ground. And then the goal will be to get each one of these main stems out to one of these uprights. Okay, so I'll have to take a video later in the year so you can actually see how that happens, because it sounds real easy, and it is easy. Or it's simple, but it's not easy, because sometimes you have to sort through and figure out where all the stems are. But the goal is to get one main stem to each one of these uprights, because the fruit will grow off of those. It makes the fruit easier to find, and then it creates a hole in the center where the sun can shine on all sides of the leaves. So you'll have this whole cage full of a tomato plant, but all the leaves will point inward, and there'll still be space in the middle for airflow and for sunlight to get in on all the leaves. So it's basically like having 12 plants in this one little spot. Okay, so after you have planted your tomato plant in your very large cage, made out of an 8-foot piece of cattle panel, the next step, obviously, like I said before, break off the lower leaves so that they'll grow longer leaves, and so that you can keep the leaves off of the ground. But you can see it's already starting to separate into different vines. I will need to find some way to support this by sticking little, a lot of times we'll use bamboo, just the little bamboo stakes or some sort of sticks, PVC pipes, anything to hold this in the middle of the cage, because otherwise it will flop down and then you'll have leaves in contact with the ground, which is not what we want. So never let the leaves touch the ground. If you have to break the leaves off, break them off, whatever it takes to do that. Next, we'll talk about the structure of the tomato plant. The tomatoes, one more update. I should have taken a video of me picking the tomatoes today. I picked 11 pounds of tomatoes. I picked about 6 pounds of tomatoes off of this plant here. As you can see, there are still tons of tomatoes. This is just down in the first 4 feet. Throughout the season, it'll continue to produce, and by the end of the season, I should be picking fruit up above my head. But for right now, these are just powerhouses. This is not a purple Cherokee, but it is a mortgage lifter. And this one has actually had less fruit. I'm hoping that it'll have more in the future, because they are giant. You can see how big these tomatoes are, and they are large pink tomatoes. It is already also close to the 8-foot mark, as is the other mortgage lifter. They have less fruit on them down low, but perhaps throughout the season they'll be just as fruitful. I was standing on a bucket to try to tie up the tomatoes. So you can see, tying tomatoes up this way, very, very productive. You see, these are just massive tomatoes. And the reason is they have the sun that they need, they have the light that they need. I'm making sure they get the water that they need. And then because we loosened up that soil so well at the beginning of the year, they have all of the nutrients that they need from the soil. loosening up the soil at the beginning of the year is incredibly important just because it allows them to get all those nutrients. This is the purple Rosella the purple Rosella cherry tomato. You can see there are just cherry tomatoes everywhere around this whole plant. It's just completely covered in cherry tomatoes, and where there's not cherry tomatoes, there's more blossoms. What I'm doing with this one, I don't want it to be 8 feet tall. I have too many already that are tall. So whenever they get near the top, I have just pinched the growing tip off so it doesn't continue to grow. So you can see here there's a little raw end where I let it get a little too big. Here's an example. This is coming out here. I'll just want to pinch that off. Pinching is better than cutting if it's small because it'll actually lose less fluid if it's pinched. All these little suckers here, as soon as you pinch off the main growing tip, because again, I don't want this more than 4 feet tall. Cherry tomatoes just get crazy. The record is something like 35 feet tall. I don't want that. Too many ladders for me. But every time, once you pick this growing tip and you pinch that off, every one of these leaf joints will start to send off shoots like it is dying because it. If this was helpful to you, or you have any other questions or things that you'd like to know about planting tomatoes, let me know in the comments. Keep it simple, keep it growing, and check out the next videos we have on harvesting onions and potatoes.